Good evening, everyone. It's great to be with you. I'm Kimberly Yee. It's been a pleasure and an honor to serve as your state treasurer of Arizona these last, I'm on 8th year. And when I first started in January of 2019, we had $15.4 billion in assets under management. Today we stand at $32.2 billion in assets under management. That's your money back in your pockets. 110% increase in that period of time, with $6 billion earned completely based on investments alone. So while it's been a privilege to serve as your state treasurer, I have a long history in education, and so I was recruited to run for state superintendent of public instruction. I was born and raised here in Arizona, went to Arizona Public Schools. My mother served as a public school teacher for 38 years in the Phoenix Elementary School District. And after graduating from Pepperdine University, which is a small Christian school next door to us in California, I worked for a couple of Republican governors, and in my portfolio of policy issues was education, K through 12, child care and development, as well as higher education, including vocational education and career technical education. And so in all of that period of time back in the 90s, we were talking about something that we hold dear as conservatives, and that's educational freedom. School choice is something that just started back in the 1990s. Can you believe that's been 30 years? And back in the day, we were talking about school choice because we, at that time, could only go to the school of the residential zip code in which you resided. Government telling you exactly where your child should go. And open enrollment allowed us to think outside of the box and say, you know what, you can go to the school anywhere in the state as long as there was availability outside of your residential zip code. That became the discussion of charter schools, an innovative approach to be able to have education, taxpayer funded, but in a way that educated your child differently than in a traditional district public school. And can you believe 30 years later, Arizona is a model in the charter school movement across the country. Isn't that amazing? We actually, if you look at U.S. News and World Report, every year they rank all of the high schools across the country. Do you know what's number one on that list? Basis Charter School, North Tucson. Number one in the entire country. And that is something we should be proud of. We also have school tuition organizations that allow for us to have tax dollars be provided, actually private dollars provided to those who want to go to a private school and can't afford that otherwise. Today we have empowerment scholarship accounts, ESAs. They allow for, yes, we can clap for that. They allow for a student to go to any school of their choice, whether it's a home school or private school, and that is an opportunity for parents to designate their child in an educational program that best suits their child's needs. We know it's working. Because when I was in the legislature, in the House and the Senate, I was proposing the founding legislation for what an ESA program would be. And by step, we were able to provide for students with disabilities, those who were in foster families, those who were military families. Today, we have universal ESAs. And that allows a child, no matter where they live, to be able to go to that opportunity of education. It's called educational freedom. It's something that is working because 100,000 students are now on ESAs in Arizona. But we have to protect that, and we know that it is working. As you look at the news, there are school closures happening across the entire state with declining enrollment. And when you dig even further, you find that it's the parents who are choosing to take their child out of a school for many reasons. One of them, I hear, is because they're trying to indoctrinate our children with woke educational programs in those classrooms. As early as kindergarten, they're asking little kids, 5 years old, what's your pronoun? In some school districts across the state, they have litter boxes for those furries who want to have, the opportunity to think that they are a cat. These are things that we have to erase from our educational system. And one of the things that I would do as your state superintendent of public instruction is sit as an ex officio member of the Board of Regents. And that's where it's beginning in our universities. Taxpayer-paid funded programs through our schools of education that are teaching teachers how to do this in the classrooms that would later become in front of our children. So we really need to make sure that we watch what is happening in our public universities and the schools of education, but we've got to touch upon reading and math. We are at the 25th percentile in proficiency in reading and math in the 4th and 8th grade. Do you believe that's acceptable? Not at all. And in fact, if you look at the NAEP scores, which is the National Report Card, It has been this way for a very long period of time, too long, and our students deserve better. It's so important for us to get back to the basics. And I believe in the old schoolhouse approach. It worked for me. The old schoolhouse approach is basic understanding of reading based on phonics-based instruction. Phonics-based reading instruction is scientifically based and it works. It's how most of us learn how to read and sound out the words. But in these trendy ways that teachers are teaching our kids, they're saying, look at a picture and figure it out. Well, that's not teaching reading. And we also have to really look at how we can engage children so they don't drop out of school. And I believe we can do that based on bringing back home ec education and shop classes. These are things that work, and they really balance out those children who really will take that pathway of the trades and vocational education. And to be able to capture that in the middle school grades, when they might start getting a little bit, antsy in their seats, we can capture that in those very, very critical grades. But what's important is that we're preparing that pathway for a state like Arizona, a high-growth state where we are continuing to open companies across the entire state, and we are not ready based on our workforce skills. So oftentimes you see corporations and companies come to Arizona and they have to push back their open date a good 2 years because they didn't have the welders ready to go. They didn't have the electricians. So we need to prepare these young students early on so we have that working, those trades prepared and ready for our kids. And we also have to look at what is happening in our schools on the finance area. And remember, I'm the state treasurer, so I look at numbers very carefully. And when I look at audit reports of school districts that have a higher than average fuel rate, they're paying money for more fuel in their big giant buses. Well, why is that happening? Well, the Auditor General found that the swipes on those cards for those little fuel tanks where the buses are parked in the districts, they're being used by the employees of the school district for their personal vehicles on your taxpayer dime. That's unacceptable. And I believe this is happening because the person who is in charge of the Department of Education today is asleep at the wheel. And I will tell you that I've spoken to many groups across the entire state. And did I just turn that off? And they are all absolutely ready to change the leadership of the state of Arizona's Department of Education. And that's why I've had 4 former state superintendents of public instruction endorse my race for state treasurer. Lisa Graham-Keegan, Jaime Malera, John Huppenthal, Diane Douglas, all of them are very uniquely different in their own way. But they all agree that the person who is currently there in that office, the incumbent, needs to retire, and we have to continue to move the needle in education in Arizona. And I will share with you my needs for this particular campaign. As you know, this is a very important race in Arizona across all statewide races. I only have 2 minutes. What I need for you tonight is, if you haven't signed my petition, I have a little table right outside of the door. And if you would sign my petition on that paper or online at KimberlyYee.com, that would be really wonderful. The other is if you would like to host an event, perhaps at in your neighborhood. We would love an opportunity to share our story across the entire state. And with this effort, we can win this primary because the Democrat who the Democrats have selected and who have supported has been endorsed by Kathy Hoffman. Do you remember who she was? She was the Democrat state superintendent before the current one. She's endorsed her race. Chris Mays has endorsed this woman's race. And all of the unions have put their money behind the Democrat that they have ready to go for the general election. So we have to have someone on the ballot on the Republican side who not only has won 2 statewide races handily, but someone who has that background in education for public schools in Arizona. So thank you so much for having me tonight. Please visit KimberlyYee.com, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time if there is. Yes, any questions tonight?